JoJo and I were high school sweethearts. Yet we lived as strangers for most of our lives. She blamed me for using an old debt of gratitude to trap her. She felt I was the shackle preventing her from chasing the man she truly loved. So, when I was withered and dying in a hospital bed, she didn't hesitate. She reached out and pulled my oxygen plug. She wanted to spend her remaining years with my brother, the true master of her heart. Now that I have been reborn, I've decided to grant her wish. I stepped aside and let my brother take my place at the altar. I watched them walk into the church, hand in hand, with a smile on my face. I gave them my blessing and walked away from the city I called home for 20 years. In this life, I only want to live for myself. Hurry up. I'm on a schedule here. JoJo stood in front of City Hall, tapping her foot impatiently. There wasn't a hint of bridal joy on her face. I stared at the sign for the clerk's office, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. In my last life, I had reached for our marriage license with sacred reverence. But JoJo had been faster. She snatched the papers and threw them into the trash can right there in the lobby. Ignoring the shocked gasps of the staff, she sneered at me. "Congratulations, Nate. You finally got what you wanted. I've paid you back now. Don't ever bother me again. Looking at you makes me sick." The memory hit me like a physical blow, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, JoJo shoved my shoulder. "I'm talking to you. Don't think acting like a statue will make me stay." In my heart, you aren't even worth a single hair on your brother's head. If you keep wasting time, we aren't getting licensed today. I looked at her beautiful, frustrated face and spoke 2 words. "Fine then." JoJo blinked, looking stunned. "What did you say? Let's not get licensed today." "You're right." "Nate, what kind of game are you playing? Do you think this pathetic threat will work?" "A threat?" Just like before, everything I said was viewed as a scheme in her eyes. I looked at her calmly. "Aren't you and my brother catching a flight? The line inside is probably huge. I don't want you to miss your plane." JoJo's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but her voice softened. "Are you sure? Nick and I don't know how long we'll be gone." "I'm sure," I said, forcing a casual shrug. "City Hall isn't going anywhere. We can do this whenever. My brother needs you more right now." I saw the massive wave of relief wash over her. Without a second thought, she turned to walk away. After a few steps, she paused and looked back. "Nate, you're the one who called it off today. My parents. Don't worry. I'll tell them it was my fault we didn't sign the papers." JoJo studied me for a long time, searching for a lie. I met her gaze with complete indifference. Finally, she spoke again. "I promised to marry you, and I won't back out. But Nick's situation is an emergency. I'll come back as soon as I can. Don't start a fight with him over this. He works so hard, you need to be more understanding." I nodded without expression. She didn't wait for another word before sprinting toward the parking lot. I watched her back disappear, feeling the familiar bitterness swirl in my chest. Memories of my past life replayed like a tragic movie in my mind. Last time, she stayed long enough to sign the papers, then abandoned me that same afternoon. She followed my twin brother, Nick, across the ocean. She didn't return for 5 long years. When she finally came back, I thought I could win her over. I thought if I gave her everything, she would eventually see my worth. But she never gave me a chance. She rarely stepped foot in our home. When she did, she only had venomous words for me. We became a couple defined by resentment and cold silences. In the end, she was the one who signed my "do not resuscitate" order without blinking. As I lay dying, she stood by my bed with ice in her eyes. "Nate, you used that childhood accident to tie me down for a lifetime. I hate you. I just want to spend what's left of my life with Nick. If there is a next life, I hope I never have to see your face again." Her final words echoed in my ears. I slowly unclenched my fists. This time, I won't let history repeat itself. "JoJo, if you love my brother that much, you can have him. Nick and I are identical twins, separated only by a tiny mole near the corner of his eye. Our parents split up when we were very young. I moved to New York with my mother and grew up next door to JoJo. Back then, we were actually close. I remember the day she almost wandered into the path of a speeding car. I lunged forward and pulled her back just in time. From that day on, we were inseparable. Then when we were 17, my father passed away. My mother brought Nick to live with us. At that point, JoJo and I had only been officially dating for 3 months. Since Nick and I hadn't grown up together, we were practically strangers. But JoJo was fascinated by him from the start. She was especially obsessed with that mole near his eye. One afternoon, she looked at me and sighed. "Nate, I think your brother is actually hotter than you. Why don't you get a tattoo of a mole just like his?" That was the first time we ever had a real fight. We didn't speak for 3 months. I waited for her to apologize, to come find me. But she didn't care. She spent every day glued to Nick's side. Eventually, I was the one who crawled back and begged for forgiveness. That was when the invisible wall rose between us. No matter how hard I tried, things were never the same. Between Nick and me, She chose him every single time. If I showed even a hint of jealousy, she would explode. She'd accuse me of being a petty brother. She even said I had a happier childhood than Nick, so I should let him have whatever he wanted now. But I didn't owe Nick anything. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was JoJo's mother. I hesitated before answering. Nate, JoJo said you backed out of the licensing. What happened? Is this about her going abroad with Nick? Don't worry, her father and I will talk some sense into her. We'll make her stay. I cut her off quickly. Mrs. Vance, it wasn't JoJo. It was me. I realized I'm not ready to settle down yet. I need more time to think things through. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance. The line went silent for a moment before she let out a long, weary sigh. Oh, Nate. Our daughter doesn't know how lucky she is to have you. My eyes stung with sudden heat, and my voice turned thick. No, ma'am. I'm the one who isn't lucky enough. Well, no matter what happens between you two, you'll always be like a son to us. I hung up and walked over to the wall, taking down the framed photo of JoJo and me. In my last life, our toxic marriage broke her parents' hearts. When Mr. Vance found out JoJo was living with my brother while still married to me, he had a massive heart attack. He died that same night. Mrs. Vance disowned JoJo after that. She died alone in a nursing home just 2 years later. JoJo spent years blaming me, claiming I turned her parents against her. That was one of the reasons she was so happy to see me die. This time, I'm walking away to save all of us. I expected JoJo to stay away for 5 years like she did before. I was shocked when she showed up at my door only 5 days later. I was coming home from my last day at work when I saw my front door was ajar. As I reached for the handle, I heard voices from inside. JoJo, since we're back for a few days, you should just have the wedding with Nate. It was Nick's voice. Nick, you know I don't want to marry him. The person I want to be with is JoJo. Nick cut her off sharply. I love you, but he's my brother. I don't want to break his heart. Plus, he saved your life. Please, just marry him. Do it for me, okay? I heard JoJo start to sob. Nick, why didn't I meet you first? Why weren't you the one who saved me? My knuckles turned white as I gripped the doorknob. Even with a second chance at life, hearing the woman I love talk like that still felt like a knife to the chest. I stood there for a long time, but I didn't open the door. I turned around and walked the streets until my legs ached. In my past life, JoJo always screamed that I used my heroism to trap her, but I had never once brought it up. I would have saved any stranger in that situation. I had even asked her, dozens of times, if she truly wanted to be with me. She always said yes. I never understood why she said yes while resenting me for blocking her happiness. Now I finally understood. She was only doing it because Nick told her to. It was pathetic, really. My phone rang. It was JoJo. Nate, I'm back in town. Are you still working this late? Yeah, I replied, keeping my voice flat. She didn't notice my coldness. I'll be here for a week. Let's just get the wedding ceremony over with while I'm here. I had begged her for a wedding in my past life. She had called me obsessed with empty rituals back then. Now Nick says the word, and she's ready to walk down the aisle. If you're busy, we don't have to rush, I said quietly. She sounded stunned by my lack of enthusiasm. Nate, what is that supposed to mean? Do you not want to marry me anymore? I was about to answer when Nick's voice came through the background. Nate, are you mad because JoJo went away with me? The next second, JoJo was snapping at me again. Nate, I already told you I cut her off. I'm not mad. I just don't want to waste your time with formalities. But if you're both set on it, let's do it. Let's have the wedding. I hung up before she could say another word. The wedding was set for 5 days later. JoJo dragged me to a bridal boutique for final fittings. Through the window, I saw her in a stunning white gown, leaning into Nick's arms. He was wearing a tuxedo. The shop assistant was gushing over them. Oh, Mrs. Vance, you and your husband look like movie stars. I've never seen a more perfect couple. JoJo gave a shy, radiant smile. I pushed the door open and walked in. The moment they saw me, they jumped apart. The smiles vanished instantly. Nick cleared his throat, looking guilty. Nate, don't get the wrong idea. You weren't here yet, so I thought I'd help you out by trying on the suit. We're the same size after all. I looked at the tuxedo on him and smiled. It looks great on you, Nick. Let's go with that one. In my past life, JoJo had planned every detail of our wedding to suit Nick's tastes. This tuxedo was no different. Fine. In this life, I'll let everything go to its rightful owner. Nick looked surprised that I wasn't angry. Don't you want to try it on? I shook my head. If it fits you, it fits me. No point wasting time. JoJo frowned, eyeing me with suspicion. You've certainly become more sensible lately, she muttered. I didn't argue. I just looked at her. JoJo, work is crazy right now. I have a huge project I need to finish. You and Nick should handle the rest of the wedding prep. I trust your taste. JoJo nodded, seemingly happy to be left alone with him. I knew my presence was just making things awkward, so I turned to leave. Nate. JoJo called out as I reached the door. There was a flicker of unease in her eyes. Is something wrong? You've been acting different. I shrugged. Not really. It's just, ever since that day at City Hall, it's like you're a different person. I thought about it for a second. I just realized a few things, that's all. She looked like she wanted to push for more, but I didn't give her the chance. Go back to your fittings. You're the bride. I'll see you later. I stayed away from her for the next few days. The night before the wedding, JoJo came to my place with my tuxedo. She found me packing a suitcase. Nate, why are you packing? Her voice was tight with anxiety. I have a business trip in 2 days, I said calmly. Just getting a head start while I have a free night. She exhaled, relaxing. She handed me the garment bag, her voice unusually soft. Here is your suit for tomorrow. Just put it on the couch, I said without looking up. I'll check it later. Nate, She was interrupted by her phone. It was Nick's ringtone. Hey Nick? What's wrong? Okay, don't move. I'm coming over right now. She stood up to leave, but paused by my side. Nate, I know you feel insecure sometimes. After the wedding tomorrow, we'll go straight to City Hall and make it official. Okay. I was genuinely shocked she would offer that. But she didn't wait for an answer. She hurried out the door. She was so sure I could never say no to her. The next morning, I carried my suitcase to Nick's hotel room. I left the tuxedo at his door with a letter tucked inside. Nick, JoJo, I know you love each other. This wedding should belong to the people who actually want to be there. JoJo, I know I tried to force things. Today, I'm letting you go. And I'm letting myself go too. I hope you two are happy. Then I headed to the airport. The heavy scent of aviation fuel and wet asphalt was the first thing that greeted me when I stepped out of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. It was raining, a quiet, persistent drizzle that hung over the emerald pine trees and blurred the distant gray skyline. I stood beneath the concrete overhang of the arrivals terminal, my single suitcase resting against my leg, and took a deep, unrestricted breath. In my past life, my lungs had always felt like they were filled with wet sand. The chronic respiratory illness that eventually killed me had started around my 26th year, aggravated by the constant, suffocating stress of my marriage. To JoJo, the long nights spent waiting for her in a dark house, the cold silences that stretched for weeks, the quiet hum of the oxygen machine that eventually became my only companion. All of it had physically withered me. But now at 23, my chest expanded without pain. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of the sea. I pulled my phone from my pocket, a brand new device with a new SIM card. I hadn't turned on my old phone since I boarded the plane in New York. I didn't want to see their calls. I didn't want to hear JoJo's angry accusations or Nick's guilty, stuttering apologies. They belonged to a different life. A life that had ended the moment I left that tuxedo at Nick's hotel room door. I hailed a local taxi, the yellow car splashing through the puddles as we headed toward the small, furnished apartment I had rented online in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. It was a modest place, just a single bedroom with a large window, overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street. I spent the first 3 days unpacking my few belongings, setting up a routine, and starting my new job at a local architectural firm. I was a junior designer, now a quiet, low-profile position that paid just enough to cover my rent and groceries. On the 4th evening, as the rain drummed a soft, rhythmic beat against my window, I sat on the floor with a cup of black coffee. I finally turned on my old phone. The screen lit up instantly, a torrent of notifications cascading down the display. 142 missed calls. 68 text messages. Most of them were from JoJo. Nate, where the hell are you? The guests are all here. Stop playing these pathetic, childish games. Sent at 9 a.m. on the wedding day. Nick showed me the note. Are you insane? Do you think this is funny? You're ruining my parents' reputation. Sent at 10:15 a.m. Nate, call me back. Right now. If you don't show up in 30 minutes, I swear to God I'm going to sign the papers with Nick anyway. Is that what you want? Sent at 11:30 a.m. And then, a single, quiet text from Mr. Vance sent later that evening. Nate, my boy, I don't know where you've gone, but I want you to know that I don't blame you. Look after yourself. You deserve to be happy. My eyes stung with a sudden, hot tear. In my past life, Mr. Vance's heart attack had been a direct result of the toxic, lingering shame of JoJo's secret affair with Nick while she was still married to me. But in this life, I had cut the knot before the string could strangle any of us. Mr. Vance was still alive. His heart was still beating. I deleted all the messages from JoJo and Nick, blocked their numbers permanently, and turned off the old phone. I walked over to the window, looking out at the soft orange glow of the street lamps reflecting off the wet pavement. I'm free, I whispered to the quiet room. And for the first time in 2 lives, I actually believed it. Back in New York, the Grand St. Jude's Church had been a scene of absolute Humiliating chaos. The pews were packed with the city's high society, all of them whispering behind their gloved hands as the ceremony's start time came and went. Mr. Vance sat in the front row, his face pale, his hands tightly clutching his wooden cane as he stared at the empty altar. Behind the heavy oak doors of the bride's preparation room, JoJo was pacing like a caged animal. Her white lace veil was pushed back, her face twisted in a mixture of anger and panic. She clutched her phone, dialing my number over and over, only to be met by the cold, mechanical voice of the operator. "He's not answering," she hissed, throwing her phone onto the plush sofa. "Nick, where is he? He was fine yesterday. He was packing his suitcase. He said he had a business trip. He wouldn't just leave like this." Nick stood by the window, his face pale as paper. He was wearing the tuxedo I had left at his door, the fabric fitting his shoulders perfectly. In his hand, he held my letter, the paper slightly crumpled from the tight grip of his fingers. "He left, JoJo," Nick said, his voice quiet, flat, and completely devoid of its usual confident charm. "He's not coming." "What do you mean he's not coming?" JoJo shrieked, marching over to him and grabbing his lapels. "This is Nate we're talking about. He's been obsessed with me since we were 15. He saved my life, Nick. He spent the last 3 years begging me to look at him. He wouldn't just walk away on our wedding day." "Read the letter, JoJo," Nick said, handing her the paper. JoJo snatched it, her eyes scanning my neat, precise handwriting. "Nick, JoJo, I know you love each other. This wedding should belong to the people who actually want to be there. JoJo, I know I tried to force things. Today, I'm letting you go, and I'm letting myself go too. I hope you two are happy." The paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the carpeted floor. He knew?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "How? I never told him." "It doesn't matter how he knew," Nick said, looking down at his own hands. "The point is he's gone. He's cleared out his apartment. His office said he resigned 2 weeks ago. He's completely vanished." The door to the room was pushed open, and Mrs. Vance walked in, her face pale, her eyes filled with a quiet, devastating shame. "JoJo, the guests are starting to leave," her mother said, her voice trembling. "Your father. His chest is hurting. We need to make an announcement." "What is going on?" JoJo looked at Nick, the man she had spent years secretly pining for, the man she had called the true master of her heart. He was standing there in his perfect tuxedo, looking at her with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. There was no romance in his eyes, no heroic passion, only the cold, stark fear of a boy who had been caught in a lie he didn't know how to spin. "Nick," JoJo said, her voice shaking as she took a step toward him. We can still do this. Nate said he's letting me go. He said the wedding belongs to us. Let's just get married. My parents are here, the guests are here. Let's do it." Nick stepped back, his eyes widening in panic. "Are you crazy, JoJo?" he whispered, looking toward the door. "If we get married today, everyone will know we were sleeping together behind Nate's back. My mother, my friends. They'll think I stole my brother's bride. I have a reputation to maintain at the firm." JoJo froze. She looked at him, and for the first time in her life, the illusion she had built around Nick began to crack. He didn't want to protect her. He didn't want to carry her through the storm. He only wanted the secret, forbidden thrill of being wanted by his brothers. Woman. Now that the forbidden aspect was gone, now that the shackle of Nate had been removed, he was terrified of the light. You don't want to marry me?" JoJo asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. I want to be with you, JoJo, but not like this," Nick stammered, backing toward the side exit of the vestry. "Not under these circumstances. We should wait. Let things cool down." He didn't wait for her reply. He pushed open the side door and rushed out into the alleyway, leaving JoJo standing in her beautiful white wedding gown, surrounded by the quiet, heavy scent of lilies and the distant, mocking murmur of the departing guests. 3 years passed like a quiet, peaceful dream. In Seattle, the winter rain eventually gave way to a bright, crisp spring, and the spring turned into a warm, glorious summer. I had been promoted to senior architect at my firm. I had bought a small, historic brick townhouse in the Queen Anne neighborhood with a small garden, where I grew red geraniums. I had a dog, a quiet, loyal golden retriever named Barnaby, and a group of friends who valued my talent and my quiet, steady presence. My health was perfect. I ran 5 miles every morning along the waterfront, my lungs clear, my chest strong. I had completely forgotten the feeling of being withered. I had forgotten the cold, heavy weight of JoJo's resentment. I was just Nate, a successful architect who loved his quiet life. But back in New York, the reality of Nick and JoJo's ideal romance was a slow, toxic decay. Without me acting as the unwilling obstacle, their relationship had lost its tragic, romantic charm. They had moved in together, but the magic had vanished. Almost instantly, Nick was lazy, insecure, and deeply resentful of the way JoJo's parents looked at him. Mr. Vance, who had survived his mild heart scare, refused to let Nick enter his house. He treated Nick like a common thief who had ruined his family's reputation and driven his favorite son-in-law away. "You're nothing like Nate," Mr. Vance would say, his voice cold and dismissive. Whenever Nick's name was mentioned, Nate was a man of honor. You're just a coward who hides in his brother's shadow." This constant comparison drove Nick crazy. He began to drink, his work at the firm slipping, his temper turning sharp and mean. He would come home late, smelling of cheap whiskey, and scream at JoJo for holding him back. "You only loved me because you couldn't have me," Nick would sneer during their late-night arguments, his face twisted in a mocking smile. "Now that you have me, you're realizing I'm not the perfect prince you imagined, aren't you? You ruined your life for me, JoJo, and now you're stuck with me." JoJo would sit on the kitchen floor, her hands covering her face, her tears falling onto the cold tiles. She remembered the way I used to wait for her. She remembered how I would prepare her favorite herbal tea when she had a headache, how I would secretly pay off her father's medical bills without asking for credit, and how I had never once screamed at her, no matter how cold she was to me. She had thought my quiet devotion was a trap. But now, living with Nick's loud, selfish rage, she realized that my love had been the only safe harbor she had ever known. One evening, after a particularly brutal fight where Nick had thrown a glass against the wall before storming out, JoJo opened her laptop. She searched my name in the National Architectural Registry. She had been doing this secretly for 3 years, hoping for a sign, a clue of where I had gone. And today, for the first time, a result popped up. Lead designer Nate Vance wins prestigious Northwest Heritage Restoration Award for his work on the Seattle Historic Library. There was a photo attached to the article. I was standing on the steps of the restored library, wearing a simple gray suit. I looked healthy, my bronze skin glowing in the Pacific Northwest sun, my shoulders broad, my face carrying a quiet, confident smile. I looked happy. I looked whole. JoJo stared at the screen, a single, hot tear rolling down her cheek. She touched the glass of the screen, her finger tracing the outline of my face. "Nate," she whispered, her voice cracking with a deep, devastating regret. You look so beautiful." The Northwest Architectural Convention was held at the Seattle Convention Center in mid-October. It was a grand event, bringing together the top firms from across the country. As the lead designer of the award-winning library project, I was invited to give the keynote address on the second afternoon. I stood on the raised platform, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, my voice calm and confident as I spoke into the microphone. I looked out at the audience, hundreds of designers, developers, and executives listening to my words with absolute attention. In the middle row, near the aisle, 2 people were sitting. The moment my eyes locked onto them, my voice didn't even falter. My breathing remained steady. It was Nick and JoJo. They looked almost unrecognizable. Nick's suit was slightly rumpled, his face bloated from alcohol, a deep, bitter frown etched into his brow. Beside him, JoJo looked thin and pale, her beautiful eyes hollowed out by years of exhaustion and regret. She was staring at me, her hands clutched so tightly. In her lap, her knuckles were white, her lips trembling as she listened to my voice. I finished my speech, the room erupting into a warm, loud round of applause. I offered a polite bow, stepped down from the platform, and began to make my way toward the exit. Nate, please wait." A hand caught my sleeve. I stopped, turning slowly. JoJo stood there. She had run through the crowd, her face pale, her eyes wet with tears. Up close, I could see the fine lines of stress around her mouth, the dark circles under her eyes that even heavy makeup couldn't hide. She looked like a woman who was withered and dying, exactly the way I had looked in that hospital bed in my past life. "JoJo," I said, my voice polite, formal, and completely neutral. It was the tone one would use with a distant, half-forgotten acquaintance. "Nate, oh my God, it's really you," she sobbed, her hand trembling as she reached toward my cheek, though she didn't dare touch my skin. You look so healthy. You look so different." "I am different, JoJo," I said quietly. "I'm happy." Nick walked up behind her, his posture defensive, his eyes filled with a mixture of jealousy, anger, and a strange, bitter embarrassment. "Nate," Nick muttered, his voice rough. You really did well for yourself out here. We saw your project." "Thank you, Nick," I said, offering him a polite nod. "I hope your work is going well too." "We're struggling, Nate," JoJo blurted out, her tears finally spilling over her eyelids. "The firm Nick's partnership was revoked last month. My father won't even speak to me. He keeps saying I threw away the only son he ever wanted. Nate, we're miserable." I looked at them. The two people who had slept together behind my back, the two people who had happily signed my death warrant in my past life. I felt no satisfaction in their ruin. I felt no joy in their misery. I only felt a vast, silent emptiness, as if I were looking at two strangers, whose lives had nothing to do with mine. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice gentle but absolute. But I have a meeting to attend. If you'll excuse me. Nate, please. JoJo cried, grabbing my wrist, her grip tight and desperate. Don't leave. Just let me talk to you. For 10 minutes. I need to explain. I need to tell you how sorry I am. I looked down at her fingers on my wrist. In my past life, her touch had been my son. I would have given my life just to have her hold my hand like this. But now her skin felt cold, like dry clay. I gently, slowly pulled my wrist from her grip, my movement carrying a quiet, unshakable strength. There is nothing to explain, JoJo, I said softly. The past is gone. Go back to Nick. He's the one you wanted. I turned and walked away, my footsteps solid and steady against the carpeted floor, leaving the twin ghosts of my past life standing in the crowded lobby, surrounded by the bright, noisy light of a world they no longer belonged to. The storm hit Seattle that evening, a fierce, cold wind howling off the sound, rattling the glass windows of my queen and townhouse. I sat in my living room, my golden retriever Barnaby resting his heavy head on my knee. I was reading a book, a soft fire crackling in the hearth, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from an unknown number. Nate, I'm downstairs. Please, just let me see you for 5 minutes. I'm freezing. I looked out the window. Under the dim yellow glow of the street lamp outside my gate, a small, wet figure was standing in the pouring rain. She was wearing a thin trench coat, her hair soaked and sticking to her cheeks, her shoulders shivering violently in the wind. JoJo. I closed my book, sighed, and stood up. I walked to the front door, opened it, and walked down the steps to the gate. The cold rain drenched my shirt within seconds, but I barely felt it. I opened the iron gate, looking down at her shivering face. Why are you doing this, JoJo? I asked, my voice quiet, almost tired. Because I made a mistake, Nate, she shrieked over the roar of the wind, her voice filled with a raw, agonizing despair. I thought I hated you because of that accident. I thought you were the shackle preventing me from being happy. But Nick is a monster, Nate. He doesn't love me. He only wanted to win. Against you. She fell to her knees in the wet grass, her hands reaching out to grab the hem of my trousers. I love you, Nate. I've loved you since we were 17, but I was too stupid, too proud to see it. Please just let me come back. I'll do anything. I'll be your wife, I'll take care of you, I'll never look at another man again. I looked down at her, sitting in the mud, her beautiful face ruined by her tears and the rain. I remembered her standing by my hospital bed in my past life, her fingers slowly, deliberately reaching out to pull my oxygen plug. Nate, you used that childhood accident to tie me down for a lifetime. I hate you. The words didn't hurt anymore. They were just an old echo, a hollow sound from a room that had been locked and burned. JoJo, I said, my voice dropping to a gentle whisper that was softer than the wind. The boy who saved your life when he was 15. He died a long time ago. He died because he spent 10 years trying to love a girl who didn't want him. I reached down, gently helping her to her feet, but I didn't hold her hands. I stepped back, putting a clear, respectful distance between us. The man standing here today, he doesn't hate you. He doesn't want to punish you. He just doesn't know who you are. Nate, please, she sobbed, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with a final, desperate panic. Don't say that. Don't look at me like I'm a stranger. But you are a stranger, JoJo, I said quietly. And so is Nick. Go back to New York. Build a life that is yours, and let me live mine. I turned around and walked back up the steps, closing the wooden door behind me. The heavy lock clicked into place with a solid, final thud. I stood in the warm hallway, drying my hair with a towel, Barnaby leaning his warm body against my leg. The rain continued to beat against the glass outside, but the storm was no longer mine. The spring arrived in Seattle with a sudden, brilliant burst of warmth. The cherry blossoms in the university quad were in full bloom, casting a soft, pink canopy over the green grass. The air was sweet, carrying the fresh scent of the sea and the mountain pine. I stood on the deck of a small, wooden ferry boat, the wind playing with my hair. Beside me stood Clara, a quiet, intelligent woman who worked as a marine biologist at the city aquarium. We had met 6 months ago at a local gallery opening, and she had smiled when she saw my design sketches of the historic library. She didn't know about my past life. She didn't know about Nick, or JoJo, or the hospital bed where I had withered away. She only knew the man I was today, a man who loved the sea, who built beautiful libraries, and whose eyes carried a quiet, gentle peace. Nate, look, Clara said, pointing her finger toward the blue water. A pod of killer whales was breaking the surface, their sleek black and white bodies glinting in the bright spring sun, their blows forming small white clouds of mist in the air. I smiled, my hand naturally finding hers, our fingers twisting together, warm and real. It's beautiful, I whispered, pulling her closer against my side. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email from my mother in New York. Nate, my dear, I wanted to let you know that Nick and JoJo have officially separated. Nick is moving back to the south and JoJo is living alone in her parents' old cottage. It's quiet here now. We all miss you, but we are so glad you are happy in Seattle. I looked at the screen, a quiet, peaceful closure finally settling into my heart. The wrong relationship had been dissolved. The wrong wedding had been canceled. The people who had hurt me had found their own quiet, logical paths, and I had found mine. I deleted the email, turned off the screen and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I looked out at the vast, open water of the Sound, the mountains rising high and proud against the clear blue sky. The page was unwritten, the story was mine, and I was finally, truly alive.